Libby, and I'm going to be talking about blood cells. Red blood cells transport oxygen from the lungs to all body cells. They're adapted to do this function because of their features. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin, which binds with oxygen in the lungs. Hemoglobin carries oxygen, which will then be released to the body cells to be used for respiration. They also have a biconcave shape, which means they have dents on each side. We call this a biconcave shape because it's concave on both sides. And it creates a large surface area and allows for the rapid diffusion of oxygen. Red blood cells do not have a nucleus, and this frees up more room for hemoglobin, maximizing the amount of oxygen they can carry. They're small, so they can pass through tiny capillaries, and therefore allow the oxygen to be distributed throughout the body. So let's just highlight these different adaptations I've just talked about. They're small, so they can pass through the capillaries. They have a biconcave shape, so they have a large surface area. They have hemoglobin to carry oxygen, and they also have no nucleus to allow more space for more hemoglobin. So red blood cells contain hemoglobin, as I've just mentioned. Whales need to store lots of oxygen because they don't breathe when they dive underwater. Whales have 2 times as much hemoglobin in their blood as humans. White blood cells defend against infections. So they have a nucleus, unlike red blood cells, and they can change their shape, allowing them to squeeze through the walls of blood vessels into body tissues and to engulf harmful microorganisms. White blood cells are responsible for defense against infection, as I just mentioned. So an example question which might come up would be, how is a red blood cell adapted to its function? So first of all, it has a biconcave shape, as I mentioned earlier, creating a large surface area. Secondly, it contains hemoglobin to allow it to bind with oxygen. Thirdly, it has no nucleus, so it has more room for carrying hemoglobin and therefore oxygen. And it's also small in size, so it can easily pass through tiny capillaries to supply oxygen to all the cells. So if red blood cells had a nucleus, this would mean there would be less room for hemoglobin and oxygen. So the differences between red blood cells and white blood cells are that, first of all, white blood cells have a nucleus. Also, they can change their shape. And finally, they defend against infection. Okay, so that's everything for blood cells and also just this general topic of circulatory system. Thanks very much for listening.